Hello. Hello. Welcome to the Estonian Business School. Welcome to the Center for Free Economic Thought. I want to start by thanking the Austrian Economic Center and the Hayek Institute in Vienna for organizing the Free Market Roadshow, and to the Estonian Business School for hosting us, the marketing department, the study council, and some other colleagues are being very helpful. So thanks everybody for helping and everybody for being here. The Center for Free Economic Thought focuses much of its efforts on the Austrian economics philosophical tradition. This school of economic thought is one of the greatest contributions of Austria to the culture and science in the world, to our heritage. And for that reason, we are very pleased and honored to welcome today His Excellency, the Ambassador of Austria to Estonia, who is going to give us some welcome remarks. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, to see so many interesting faces. It's always a pleasure when you're ambassador of a country and you can celebrate one of your great sons. And Friedrich August Hayek indeed is one of the great sons of Austria, one of the most prominent figures of the Austrian School of Economics, and recipient of the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science in 1974, so exactly 50 years ago. In the world of economics, but also in political philosophy, and I think you're going to hear a lot about that in the course of this Free Market Roadshow, few personalities have made such an impact as Friedrich August Hayek. His contributions to the understanding of markets, individual freedom, and the limitations of central planning have had a profound impact in history and continue to shape debates until today. Today, or rather this year, and now I'm coming to a second anniversary, we also celebrate the 80th anniversary of the publication of The Road to Serfdom. In this pioneering work, Friedrich August Hayek examined the tendency of state planning to slowly but surely transform interventionist economies into totalitarian and dictatorial systems. Born in Vienna in 1899, Friedrich August Hayek lived through tumultuous times that shaped his worldview. He witnessed the devastation of World War I, the hyperinflation of the interwar period, and the rise of totalitarian regimes across Europe. These experiences deeply influenced his thinking. At the heart of Hayek's philosophy is a deep appreciation for the spontaneous order that emerges from the interactions of individuals in free markets, efficiently allocating resources and facilitating cooperation without need for top-down direction or state intervention. But Hayek's thinking and ideas go beyond economics, recognizing the interconnection between economic freedom and political freedom. Profound political and social transformations have taken place since Hayek's time, from the rise of digital technologies to the growing awareness of environmental sustainability. Our contemporary landscape presents new challenges and opportunities that demand fresh perspectives. By critically engaging with Hayek's ideas in light of these developments, we can gain a deeper understanding of their enduring relevance and adapt them to meet the needs of our time. Today's speakers, as I understand, will explore the various dimensions of Hayek's work and discuss the ongoing relevance of his ideas about liberty, especially in the context of current European politics and the upcoming elections to the European Parliament. I would like to thank all the speakers. I would like to thank the Hayek Institute and the Center for Economic Thought, and of course the Estonian Business School for hosting this event. I wish you all interesting talks, spirited debates, fruitful intellectual exchanges, and new insights, contacts, and connections. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Next, we have a message from Barbara Kolm, the director of the Austrian Economics Center in Vienna, read by Dr. Butler. Please.
Thank you. Barbara Kolm from the Hayek Institute in Vienna is the founder of the Free Market Roadshow, and she's asked me to extend her warm greetings and welcome to you today for this Free Market Roadshow in Tallinn. And she sends special regards to our local host, Juan Sáenz-Diez, and the Center for Free Economic Thought, and to Mikl, the Dean of the Estonian Business School, and expresses her thanks for their valuable work and the long-term partnership. She continues, more than 15 years ago, the Free Market Roadshow started out in 4 capitals with a couple of speakers and a total of 300 attendees. Now, 17 years later, we run up to 50 conferences annually in more than 35 countries, and we're proud of the network that we've built. The Free Market Roadshow is not only an academic event at universities, but also addresses public policy issues with an entrepreneurial, journalistic, and policy-orientated audience. We've anticipated topics long before they were discussed by the broader public. For example, the migration crisis that hit Europe in 2015 was the main topic of the 2014 Free Market Roadshow. Equally, the sovereign debt crisis was discussed in 2008, when everybody still thought that the US mortgage crisis would only affect a few, if any, European banks. There are, says Barbara, many more examples, but we ask you now to go ahead and discuss and solve tomorrow's problem at the Free Market Roadshow. Thank you.
Thank you. A final brief message. This is going to be the last message from a very special guest who wanted to be here, but unfortunately he couldn't make it here, Mr. Mart Laar. So Mart Laar was, of course, a Prime Minister of Estonia from 1992 to 1994. And we really owe much of the freedom that we enjoy in Estonia today to his vision and to his free market policies at the time. So here's the message. Dear friends, I am really happy to welcome you to Estonia to the Free Market Roadshow in Tallinn. What you can witness around you is a demonstration of how to use liberty to move from slavery to freedom and prosperity. Freedom works here, even in difficult times. As a result, Tallinn is an excellent place to study the ideas of Friedrich von Hayek. His warnings are absolutely present in the modern world. Big controlling government can be there before you even notice, and debt slavery arrives under most liberal slogans. It is absolutely clear that we must do a lot to save our planet, but is that eco-socialism with all its regulations, controls, and restrictions really what we need? Are new taxes really helping us to achieve our environmental goals or moving us to new slavery? These are only some crucial questions to discuss. Friedrich von Hayek can help here. I wish you all success and a pleasant stay in Estonia. Thank you, Mr. Laar. Now my remarks. So in our current geopolitical context, and with the 2024 European Parliament election in June, now is a critical moment to reflect on the concepts of liberty, democracy, prosperity, and peace. Let's remember that politics, progress, and peace are ultimately driven by the predominant ideas in a culture. In that sense, few philosophers have made as significant contributions as Friedrich Hayek. Probably we all know that Hayek won the Nobel Prize, as we were reminded by the ambassador. But how much do we really know about what he had to say about social science? How are those ideas critical in our current cultural and political environment? Two of his books stand out in Hayek's contribution to the social sciences, The Road to Serfdom and The Constitution of Liberty. Those of you who are my students, you know I like to bring the books when I talk about them. I would call both of these books must-reads, really, for any active mind curious to understand today's problems and solutions that are principle-based. And today, I have a little announcement. We are presenting to you, we're giving out a new edition, a very small mini edition of The Road to Serfdom in cartoons in Estonian. It's actually here. We are giving this out for free at the end of the event. So it's in Estonian, it's about cartoons, it has some text in it, and hopefully it's a good introduction and a teaser for the real works of Hayek. Would actually want to thank especially Maria Kotsova and Harald Pajula for helping in the translation of this into Estonian. Thank you very much. It wasn't that easy. All right, and today we have an excellent panel of speakers to elaborate on these ideas. They are top academics and think tankers, if that word exists, in the field of economic thought and Hayek and European politics. We have Dr. Gabriel Mursa, who is a professor at Alexandru Ioan Cuza University at Iasi. Iasi. Doing my best here, sorry. In Romania, where he teaches economic theory and the history of economic thought. He founded the Friedrich von Hayek Institute in Romania and translated most of Hayek's works, I understand, if not all, into Romanian. We also have Dr. Eamonn Butler, who you just met, the founder and director of the Adam Smith Institute in the UK, and the author of several books on Adam Smith, Friedman, von Mises, Hayek, and others. He continues researching and writing about Hayek and other economic topics for national magazines and newspapers. And finally, we have Glenn Hodgson, who is the CEO and founder of the Free Trade Europa, a policy think-do tank in Sweden that promotes free trade, liberalization, and the rule of law at the European level. He has 2 decades of experience as a lobbyist, strategist, and communications advisor with European institutions, blue-chip international companies, and non-governmental organizations. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the stage, please, gentlemen. Each will take turns in giving us the little lecture, and if you have questions after, we're going to have a time for debate and discussion. If there's any burning question at the moment, we can take it now, but better if we have the debate at the end, right? Please send us feedback. You will see in the screens at the end the QR for where to send us feedback. And finally, there's also an initiative from the Austrian Economic Center. There's a petition there as well you can get from the links. So without further ado, I want to welcome Dr. Mursa. Either you can come to the lectern and stay there, or just feel free to, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan, for your kind introduction. Thank you all, dear friends of liberty, for being here with us, attending this very interesting event organized by Austrian Economic Center, Hayek Institute Vienna, and its partners around Europe. I choose to talk about Hayek because I consider him one of the greatest thinkers in history of social science, in my opinion, maybe the most important of them. This is why in 2011 I founded Hayek Institute Romania, sorry, whose main objective is to disseminate the main idea of liberalism in this part of Romania, in east of Romania. At the same time, I was coordinator of translation of Hayek works into Romania, and I myself translated 5 of his books, very, very interesting books. So not only I know his ideas pretty well, but being born in a socialist society, in a socialist country, I'm convinced that Hayek was right. In 1980s, I was a teenager, and I saw how socialism was collapsing in Romania, in other countries of Europe. At that time, I didn't understand the reason for collapse, but I found it out later by reading books of Mises, Milton Friedman, and especially Friedrich Hayek. Therefore, I can say that Hayek's ideas proved to be correct not only in theory in the 1930s when they were formulated, but also in practice 60 years later. More than that, I consider that they are relevant today, almost a century after their formulation. In order to explain, well, it doesn't work? Please. Okay. In order to explain the relevance of some Hayekian ideas in our days, I choose as a starting point a very simple and clear truth. We live in a modern society in an extended social order. The main feature of modern society is the complexity. Modern society means great society, as Adam Smith said, or extended order, as Hayek said. It's very important to say that in our days, the world population reaches now more than 8 billion people. Comparing to Hayek, when Hayek formulated his idea in 1930s, when world population was 2 billion people. So we live now in 2024 in a very complex and dynamic society, a very complicated, a very sophisticated one. Yesterday at the dinner, I met, for example, a guy from Argentina living in Estonia, a Brazilian working in Tallinn, and a guy from China is here. Yeah, having a fiancé from Finland, a Romanian speaking a bad English from Romania in Estonia. So we live in a really, really complex and modern society. But in order to explain the relevance of Hayek ideas in our day, I have to explain the 2 ways to build a society. The first model was proposed by Plato many centuries ago, and his explanation was by a single mind. An extraordinary or brilliant mind design and construct, like an engineer, a social order, a simple social order following a plan. The second explanation appeared or emerged during the history of ideas was this: by a free cooperation or a common genius. This idea was formulated 20 centuries ago by Cicero. Cicero said that in our country, the state was not established by the genius of one person, but a kind of common genius of many citizens, and not in the course of one human life by the work of several generations. Hayek formulated his ideas starting from ideas conceived or theories proposed by Cicero and Adam Ferguson. Adam Ferguson, in the second part of, I think, 70th century, yes, 70, said that nations are based on institutions which are the result of human action, but not a human design. Starting from this point of view, Hayek demonstrated that in complex society, the complex society, extended social order cannot be organized in a constructivist manner, but works or functions as a spontaneous order. This happens because of the special nature of human knowledge. From Hayek's point of view, inspired by Karl Menger, another very important Austrian thinker, Hayek said that knowledge is personal, exclusive, dispersed, not concentrated or integrated, a knowledge of time and space, subjective, ineffable or unspeakable, and non-communicable. Hayek said also that knowledge is a practical one, a tacit knowledge, as Mikl Polanyi, a very interesting thinker, Hungarian, I think, said, a knowledge very difficult to transmit, to pass on. Also, Karl Popper, one of the Hayek's friends, said that because of this nature of human knowledge, because of this character of knowledge, it's impossible to centralize this knowledge distributing among many individuals' minds. Because the human knowledge has this characteristic, there can exist only two special types of social order: taxis and cosmos. Taxis and cosmos are two Greek words used by Hayek, I think, in a book I translated, Law, Legislation, and Liberty. Taxis is an intentional constructed order according to a plan, always a small and a simple social order. And the second, the cosmos, an extended order, a complex one, this order being the result of human action, but not a human design. This complex order, in Hayek's view, is always a spontaneous one, a polycentrical one, as Mikl Polanyi put it. Spontaneous order or autopoiesis. Autopoiesis is a word from biology invented by two biologists from Chile, Humberto Maturana and Francisco Varela, that defines very well the ideas of Hayek. A spontaneous order is a system capable or able to producing and maintaining, it's very important, itself by creating its own parts. The most important in operating principle of spontaneous order is the freedom of individual to use his personal knowledge to achieve his ends, his objective, and indirectly for benefit other people. This specific knowledge of time and space can be useful to others through free cooperation or free coordinations of individual plans. Because this personal knowledge, this subjective knowledge, this tacit knowledge is embedded, is contained in goods and services traded among the system of relative price. The relative price system can be seen as a form of spontaneous order used in a complex society in order to allocate the scarce resources towards the satisfaction of personal objectives. It's very important to say that in a complex society we have no other instrument to organize the economic activities. It's also important to say that we have to use the relative price system when the society becomes more and more complex. Because we are living now in a very, very complex society, the society in which we live now, we need, and this is the main consequence of Hayek view, of Hayek theories, because we live in a complex, more complex and complex, in an increasingly complex society. We need more freedom or more free market and less central control. This is, in my opinion, the most important lesson of Hayek gives us after a century. And I have in these two slides an example of spontaneous order taking into account the social networks like Facebook or Instagram. So Facebook and Instagram are social networks. They allow people to cooperate, freely exchange information, ideas, photos, messages, and something like this. These instruments of social cooperation, like social network, Facebook, Instagram, cannot be controlled in detail and work as spontaneous order, the fundamental objective of which is generation of mutual benefits. The only condition for their functioning, for their working, for their operation is the observance of general rules of behavior, of conduct. These social networks have managed to become increasingly complex and include a growing number of individuals. Facebook, 2 billion active users, and Instagram, more than 600 million users, generating mutual benefits for so many people precisely because they don't work as a centrally created orders or taxes, but as spontaneous orders. In my opinion, this is the most important lesson Hayek gives you us. Thank you so much. And because I was born in a closed society many years ago, many years ago, when we had to learn English because nobody was interested in learning English, because there were no magazines in English, because nobody could travel outside except Russia. Nobody was interested in learning English. So please excuse my poor English. Thank you so much.
Thank you, friends. It's very good to see so many people here who are actually interested in new ideas. I always think with these sort of Soviet-era buildings that still exist, it must be almost impossible to have an original thought in this building. But you seem to be interested in thought. I was also interested in what was said about Mart Laar and Hayek and Friedman. you might think, okay, I'm here at the business school, and I need to pass my exams and get my degree and then go out and become an entrepreneur and all that sort of stuff. But ideas actually matter. Ideas shape events. And when I reflect back on Milton Friedman, for example, and Mart Laar and Hayek, their ideas have changed the world. Hayek, for example, I remember when she became leader of the Conservative Party in the UK, she famously, at a meeting of her colleagues, who were all saying, "Oh, I think we should be more moderate, Mrs. Thatcher. We shouldn't have this free market stuff." She took out of her bag a copy of Constitution of Liberty by F.A. Hayek, slammed it on the table, and said, "This is what we believe." And that's what she did. And similarly, Mart Laar told me that when he was setting off to be Prime Minister, that the only Western economics book that he'd been able to lay his hands on during the Russian occupation was Milton Friedman's Free to Choose. And he thought, well, this is what Western economics is all about, so we'd better do that. Let's do this free market stuff. And that's where it all came from. So the power of ideas is absolutely extraordinary, and that's why we should be extremely keen to find out more about ideas. I've been asked to address the topic of why restrain government, of restraining government. And the first question is, why should you want to restrain it? I mean, after all, government does some good stuff. It produces, I suppose, social welfare, public services. So a lot of people would say, well, why do you want to restrain this? And Hayek's answer, and Friedman's answer as well, is firstly to promote economic prosperity. Because government intervention, this is particularly strong in Friedman's view, government intervention means that you get distortions in the market, then you get inefficiencies, and as Hayek says, then you get discoordination. And nobody quite knows what they're doing, and nothing quite matches up, and supply chains break down, and the whole thing lands you into poverty. And as we've heard about Hayek's idea of the spontaneous order, that self-interest drives us to produce a social order which is actually beneficial to everybody, as if driven by an invisible hand, as Adam Smith said. And decentralized decisions make use of that dispersed information, and hence resources are used much more efficiently. The second reason that Hayek gives to restrain government is to safeguard individual liberty. He's extremely strong on this point. Again, central choices, central decision-making to Hayek means that individuals must be coerced, and coercion is an evil, so we must reduce that. The second thing, the second reason for wanting to safeguard individual liberty is that when the government controls economic life, it controls the whole of life. Hayek gives a sort of 1940s example of, well, supposing that you're trying to form a political party and put some ideas into public debate that the government doesn't like. Well, if the government owns all the meeting halls and all the printing presses and all the media, then you'll never get your message out. So if the government controls economic life, it then controls social life. And you have to remember that government is run by people. It's not run by angels. It's run by people, and they have their own values and supporters to give favors to. And in terms of promoting economic prosperity, the third point really is that the evolved order, the social order, the spontaneous order, it's an evolutionary system. And it depends on the diversity, having diversity of individuals. It's just like biodiversity. Everybody's saying, oh, we need biodiversity. But economic diversity is just as important. You need a variety of products in order to choose the best ones. You need a variety of ideas and processes to choose the most cost-effective. And Hayek even believed in competition in currency. So, you know, today people are talking about crypto, and that's popular precisely because it gives you an alternative to a government currency which is commonly debased. And centralized decision-making means that you get less of this economic biodiversity. And that, of course, then has unintended results because you have less responsibility, policies don't work out quite the way you want, and they have negative effects. And you get less diversity, and therefore you get less learning, and you get less progress. But it's progress that we want. So another reason that Hayek gives to want to restrain government is that he wants to prevent concentration of power by the few. As I say, governments are run by people, and people are human. They have human desires and so on. And power can be misused. It commonly is misused, and will be unless it's restrained. And that leads to corruption, and it leads to favoritism, and the erosion of individual rights and the erosion of justice. And, says Hayek, in that sort of a system, centralized system, all decisions made at the center, it's the worst people who get on top, because they are the people who are ruthless enough to manage this system. And they don't have any qualms about using power. And they use power against whoever they want to use it against. So the worst get on top, according to Hayek. And what happens then, of course, is that these policies, even more brutal policies, fail. And so people say, we need an even stronger leader. We need somebody who's even tougher. And so that's when this leads into dictatorship and totalitarianism. So how then do we actually restrain government? Hayek has three solutions. Firstly, you have to be committed to having limited government. You must focus on maintaining the rule of law. You must focus on maintaining justice and protecting individual rights. He says that we do need some public goods. The government needs to produce some public goods, but you need to keep that limited in order to make sure that you're still committed to having a small government. Otherwise, it will just keep growing and growing and growing. His second solution to restraining government is to have constitutional limits, to have clear limits on government powers, clear outline of what rights and freedoms individuals have. And he says you need a separation of powers. But not just two chambers that do the same thing, and one votes one way and one votes the other, and then there's a sort of merge, and there's a sort of bargaining process, and they come out with some, I see this in Brussels all the time, come out with something which is, nobody's happy with. Not that, but one chamber should focus directly on the rules of justice to make sure that whatever these guys are doing, this house which administers the machinery of government, that it's always being done in a just way, that it's not being done to favor individual groups or party supporters or whatever. So it's a very different kind of separation of powers that you might find in, let's say, the Constitution of the United States. And laws, he says, need to be broad and predictable and apply to everybody, including politicians. That's very important. That then prevents discretionary decision-making, people favoring their own chums, and so on. And it enables ordinary individuals to make predictions. You can invest in something knowing that somebody from the government isn't going to come in tomorrow and say, oh, well, we'll just take that, thank you very much. So you can plan ahead and you can invest, and that's the way that you build up businesses, through investment. Hayek and Friedman agree that another good restraint on growing government is free markets, because again, as we've heard, decentralized economic decisions allow economic diversity and promote prosperity. They allow enterprise and self-help, which means that you have less need for government intervention. And Hayek's last solution to keep government under restraint is for decentralization and subsidiarity. Decision-making should be done at the most local level, he says. Individual circumstances can then be taken into consideration. You know, what is good for the country or for the region or for the city or for the local community. That can be taken into consideration because the interests of people miles away might be completely different. So that again, that subsidiarity limits the concentration of power, because there's limits to what the people at the center can do, because everybody else is making their own decisions. And of course, it also means, and I come from the UK, it also means that people can vote with their feet. That if they don't like the way they're being governed, they can leave. At least that's the theory of it in the European Union. If there's an alternative system of government somewhere else, people can leave, and they do leave, and we see them leaving. All over the world, people leave tyrannical regimes to try to get to freer ones. And, well, maybe that's a lesson for the European Union, but that's Greg's field, not mine. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eamonn. We shall try to follow that and talk a little bit about some of the things that are happening at the moment. And good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in Tallinn with the sun shining. And thanks also to the Estonian Business School for being able to host us today. For the next few minutes, I will say a few words about the current anti-business approach of the EU institutions. Also, the current focus on this more dirigiste industrial policy, which is very popular at the moment, but also how the wrong direction has been taken on trade and also labour market issues as well in a European context. We can also talk a little bit about the forthcoming European elections in June and the impact these will have on the status quo. So to say a little bit about the anti-business approach of the EU institutions at the moment, for the past 5 years, the European Parliament and the European Commission have been doing a very good job of undermining business and forcing on them bureaucracy, red tape, and also unnecessary rules, because we see a lot with the goals of the green and digital transition, how they're wrongly set up in terms of the current approach, getting us heading in the wrong direction. Also, we're seeing Europe's economic success and growth suffering at the expense of the increased virtue signaling we're seeing at the moment. Also, when we talk about the sustainability and environmental measures currently in place, many of these just mean costs with very few benefits, while making EU business uncompetitive. And in this regard, the EU Green Deal, for example, needs to be rethought, with politicians and companies alike having been afraid to speak up for fear of abandoning the current orthodoxy and also being attacked for it. And when it comes to technology, the approach is just about regulation and control rather than facilitation at the current stage. We see this in the AI Act and the platform economy issues that the discussions have been focused on. And when we should be creating an environment that is positive for entrepreneurship, innovation, and also research, issues and areas, of course, where Estonia and Estonians are set to excel, this is something we should be focusing on. And there's a common saying that the US comes up with ideas, Asia produces things and Europe just regulates things. And this is becoming far too common and far too real with big centralized governance, the flavor of the minute in the Brussels context at the moment, sadly. And related to this idea of control is that of the industrial policy in Europe and how this is being rolled out in the wrong way, because the current approach of the EU institutions is noticeable for its focus on interference, on meddling, and also picking winners. And this common use of state aid is undermining market forces, it's distorting competition in Europe. And the argument that China and the US are doing it is no real excuse, because there's never a right way to do a wrong thing. And state aid is wasting taxpayers' money, it's propping up inefficient businesses, it's also driving cronyism and creates this dependency. So firms are less likely to innovate, and it leaves the door open to more political interference. So in short, we should not be stifling the free market and entrepreneurship and innovation in the European Union. And we're also seeing this, the wrong approach being taken on trade and labor market issues as well, because when it comes to trade, sadly, trade barriers are being erected while potential trading partners for the EU are being ignored and often antagonized. And it's a great pity and also a lost opportunity that the EU is not reaching out to global partners and recognizing positive change. Instead, we have the Green Deal in particular has become a byword for protectionism and also intransigence, because international trading partners are seeing their commodities being targeted with these trade barriers. New EU regulation on deforestation, for example, is a great example, along with the climate border adjustment mechanism. And we see in terms of international deals as well, for example, EU-Mercosur, for example, this is being threatened by vested interests and blatant protectionism. The EU economy and consumers will also lose out as a result of this, and this is annoying our potential allies too. The president of Uruguay recently stating that they should be looking more to China as a strategic partner instead, and therefore the EU influence globally is set to slide as a result if things are not put on a different path. So the EU should be thinking about leaving this current isolationist path and really engaging more with friendly democracies across the globe to try and strengthen trade and promote open markets. And in this world increasingly marked by polarization and fragmentation, it's more important than ever before that the EU sets a good example and acts as an open and global trading partner rather than a fortress Europe which closes the door on opportunities for trade and partnership with other areas of the world. And this idea of building a global consensus would be much more powerful and much more sustainable. And these concrete actions should include the establishment of a dialogue and also engaging countries in the regulatory and standard setting process, not just delivering a fait accompli and saying everyone needs to be able to follow this. And going further, I think that there should be covering this recognition of global norms and also understanding that countries have different levels of responsibility in reaching the overall objectives, and this should be set out accordingly. And also a little bit on labour policy. We've been doing a lot of work on that recently. And the EU has a very 1950s view of labour market and also how jobs work at the moment, failing to understand often the role of digitalization, the need for flexibility and the need for choice too, with many people in Europe moving away from the 9 to 5 and having more choice over when, where, and how they earn money. And of course, the focus on entrepreneurship here, this is a big element within that. European figures say that there's 40 million freelancers in Europe at the moment, and the vast majority of these people do not want to be employed, and the Platform Worker Rights Directive is in a position where it may be threatening a presumption of employment, where everyone has to be sort of forced down a traditional 9 to 5 route. And it's really vital that the millions of entrepreneurs across Europe, as well as freelancers, one-person companies, are not forced into these employment relationships against their will, because a forced shift from an autonomous business model to a more rigid employment structure would be terrible for independent talent, and also would severely diminish the flexibility and freedom that are fundamental to why many choose to be entrepreneurs, freelancers, or look towards fractional work and platform work. So really, in sum, to sum up the last 5 years, the von der Leyen Commission has been responsible for many expensive schemes and programs, which have done very little to focus on economic growth, or at the same time hampering business with the red tape, the expensive rules in the name of sustainability, green goals, but also demonizing legitimate businesses, something that's become very common at the moment, and really backed up by the European Parliament, who's been almost acting like a big NGO as opposed to a sustainable and responsible co-legislator in this process. So as Europe falls behind China and the US in terms of innovation, competitiveness and growth in many areas, it's time that we listened more to the market and allowed free enterprise to flourish more and more. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. I think we can start with the Q&A section. Q&A, debate, whatever. It's open. So yes, I think we have some initial questions somewhere here. Please.
Well, thank you very much for this overview of the classical heritage of these very famous authors, and also update of new political agenda. But I think we should also have some self-reflection what universities should do in the present situation. Well, I am such a small business angel. I have invested to 12 startups, and my feeling is in such a startup world. Now there are many teams, and even cross-cultural teams. Diverse competencies are in teams. But at the same time, I have such a feeling that some part, I am not saying that all, but some part of young generation is a bit allergic against cooperating in entrepreneurship in cross-cultural global teams. And they even hint that, okay, I want to read some book or do something alone, and I'm frustrated if I get some negative feedback from my teammates, or some teammates are maybe a bit lazy or communicating in a wrong way. So my question, based on this background, comes on what are the challenges in action learning for universities if we make such an assumption that maybe free market economy is in this century very much based on team entrepreneurship. And teams are not always from the same street where you have born. The teams might be based on internet, they might be global. So do you have any reflections or advice on this issue?
Would you like to address that question to anyone in the panelists? Or?
It's for all panelists.
I don't know. You're the academic.
No. Yeah, well, thanks for the question. From my perspective, I've been seeing the opposite. A lot of young people seem to be very sort of tuned into this in terms of utilizing the skills, knowledge, and expertise that actually exists, going cross borders to find the solutions, building the teams that are necessary for the startup or the organization that they're trying to create. But at the same time, underpinning this with digitalization. So not having sort of hard and set structures, but more of a matrix, and using technology to find if there's someone in Brazil who's got a specific competence, having a project that they can be brought in for to help out in kind of these fractional roles. And also at the same time, the utilization of digitalization, whether it's AI and the tools, to using the different skills, tools that are available to actually help and in some cases speed up, reduce the costs, increase efficiencies for starting the businesses. And I think sort of this idea of universities being at one with this is crucial. But also individuals themselves need to be taught how to think, but also taught how to be adaptable, and also to be able to sort of continue learning. So it's not that you just come to the Estonian business school, you've got your degree in your pocket, you leave, and that's it. It's this constant, always in beta, always learning, this openness to new ideas. And I think with the sort of the idea that things are moving so quickly, and your education becomes, if not obsolete, then certainly needs updating every 6 to 12 months. So just keep in that cycle of always learning and always adding to the basic knowledge. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, clearly he means coming to the Center for Free Economic Thought. Okay,
Absolutely.
It's not only about your degree. You also come here. And
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that is absolutely true. There is a diversity of ideas out there. When people ask me about, well, what should we do about the universities, I always say, well, I wouldn't start from here, right? It's a really bad place to start. You know, not this particular institution, but the universities in general. Throughout the world, that is true, particularly, I think, in America and increasingly in Britain and the UK and the EU. I think, you know, part of it is that the incentives of academics are different. Academics are not entrepreneurs. They might like to think they're intellectual entrepreneurs, but the pressures are on them to be safe and do the safe thing, whereas the pressures on an entrepreneur is to take a risk, try something, see if it works, do it on a small scale, and then if it does work, you can do more of it. So I think the incentives are really quite different. And then, of course, you've got this heavy overlay of state funding and control. So, you know, as Hayek says about the intellectuals and socialism, it's not surprising that people who owe their living to the government are going to be nice to the government. They're not going to question it as much as other people do. But as you say, there are lots of different centers. There are think tanks, and there are independent universities, and all sorts of people around the planet. You know, that's what we need to be building up and working with. Please.
So, I have a good few questions here. Shall I ask the question about European politics or more about economic theory? Which one would you prefer?
turning on.
You can ask them both for me. I don't know. Juan,
okay, let's go with the European policy then. Does EU go beyond acceptability in terms of data collection regulation? We have GDPR and all the fines, and the US constantly being in a battle with Google, with Facebook, with the large data corporations.
In terms of data protection, should we...
Protection, data collection, has the EU gone beyond what is what you would consider acceptable?
Well, GDPR, people have got sort of used to this. The worrying thing is that now with some new regulations come through, particularly sort of the AI Act, just saying that you're just collecting data, which is essential, but this algorithmic management elements coming in, that sort of humans have to have control at every stage. I think this is the problem when you get people who don't understand the technology who are writing legislation, and they come up with these. The praxis is something that's detached from the words and legislation. So that, I think that's something that's come out recently with this. Yes, it's going too far in terms of really trying to control things as opposed to harness the power of digitalization and data as well as kind of the lifeblood of business, but also the allowed to share between different entities. I think there's the far too safe erring on the side of caution in terms of stop everything, because it doesn't seem to be, we don't understand it, or we don't think it seems to be good.
I mean, I think the AI regulation is just a killer, an absolute killer. It's this precautionary principle that seems to be in everything. Don't take a risk.
Yeah.
And the thing with AI is that, some of it could be pretty dangerous, right? Well, there you need some strong regulation. Most of it's probably quite innocuous. So you don't need that same heavy-handed regulation for all of it. So you choose your regulation, you tailor it according to the risk. And I'm afraid politicians are very bad at understanding risk and reward. They just don't do it.
And the problem with regulation, with state regulation, is that the state intervention destroys knowledge, and destroying knowledge, the society become smaller and simpler and poorer.
Yeah.
This is the main problem of state regulation.
Okay, then a more economics theory based. What are, in your opinion, the largest weaknesses of laissez-faire capitalism? What are the issues there actually that we see if we give full market freedom where there is no government intervention? What are the main issues there?
I don't know. It's impossible to conceive a society without a state. And thinkers like, for example, for me said that state is needed in a society in order to impose the observance of rules, of general rules, because it's impossible to organize society including in a spontaneous sense without rules. We need state, but a state with only some functions, not many functions, not a state that spends a lot of money, 30% of GDP, for example, as in Romania. This is not a state in a capitalist, a real capitalist society.
And I would say, if you want to go into what is one of the things that are the weak points, is that it's difficult to understand. That is the weak point, because you need to understand what it is. You need to understand that you are responsible now for your life. Nobody comes to save you, in very general terms, theoretical terms. And that is difficult to understand and difficult to actually get out of the government shackles and that 30% or 40% or whatever it is. And then you do your own thing, really to understand it and discover your freedom, your personality, your individuality, and then flourish. That is difficult. Okay, there's a mental jump there that is difficult.
I think that is the weakness of it, that it's difficult to understand, and therefore people unwittingly smother it. Things like minimum wage right now. Read your Milton Friedman, he says a minimum wage and rent controls and all these things are very silly. And in the long run, logically, he's absolutely right. But people say, oh, well, it's terrible that people should be working for just a few dollars an hour, or that rents are, so many hundreds of dollars a week. We really ought to regulate that. And everybody assumes, oh, yes, of course we should. So that's the problem of it, that it's always prey to the state. And the trouble is, when you have a liberal like Hayek, who believes in the state, who believes that you do need a state, the difficulty then is keeping that under control. Because there's so many people who think, well, I think the state should just do this little bit as well. And then somebody else says, well, maybe it should do that as well. And so it just grows and grows and grows. And that's why the sort of hardline libertarian view is at least consistent, whereas Hayek and co. and me always have trouble keeping the state under control.
Yeah. And I think it's also the case a bit because, as Juan was saying, there is this individual responsibility, which can be quite scary as well. The buck stops with you. You have to sort of take responsibility. You can't complain to someone else. And of course, it's like a sunny day like this. You open the window, you get fresh air in, but you also get flies. So it's, it goes both ways.
And then if they permit me, 2 more questions, but one more definitely. So Hayek is a big proponent of competition, and competition really regulating the market and solving issues like bad actors, so who are unethical, exploitative. We see this in so many multinationals currently. But this relies on the assumption that consumers are well informed. Isn't this a problematic idea that Hayek puts forth? Because we have actually seen that consumers are not well informed. Consumers act very irrationally and make decisions that are perhaps not in line with Hayek's theory.
If somebody acts irrationally, it doesn't mean they're not informed. I think consumers are incredibly informed, and it is part of the job of entrepreneurs. You're obviously going to be a great entrepreneur because you've got 3 questions for the price of 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you has a 4th one. So.
It's part of the job of entrepreneurs is to inform people and to make sure that this is, advertising is largely about telling people a product exists and it does this or it does that. And so that's very much a part of the market. So, don't knock individuals. And it may be that they think, well, there's no point in me researching this product in depth because, the difference as to whether that it's going to make to me is very marginal. But when it does matter to them, yeah, I mean, if I'm going to spend a lot of money on, I don't know, a new fridge or a new car, I do a lot of research, right? And so does everybody else. But if it's, do I buy this bar of chocolate or that one? It doesn't matter very much. I'll just,
And now that you brought Hayek into that, it's actually very Hayekian to say everybody individually, including all his irrationality, is free to take that decision. And capitalism, what it's going to do is to take advantage that everybody has their decision, and it's for him that is relevant, instead of for somebody in Brussels. Okay, so it's precisely that thing. Now but you will be responsible for your irrationality. Nobody's covering you for that.
In order to understand the vision of Hayek about competition, I recommend you, because I think you are a student, an essay very, very interesting, written by Hayek many years ago, titled Competition as a Way of Discovery.
Discovery procedure.
Yes, yes. Very, very good one.
Yeah, yeah.
And then last question.
And
Oh, you get
also,
4 questions.
in my opinion, because there are many young people in the room, I recommend you also
numbers of buyers, and you have
it?
perfect information. It's a nonsense. You never have perfect information. And as Hayek says, you don't know how many sellers are appropriate to a market. In some markets it's a lot, in others it's very few. And that makes sense. It's something you have to discover. This is an evolutionary process of discovery.
In fact, Hayek says that every individual is ignorant in the sense that every people acts based on a small piece of knowledge from the total amount of knowledge in society.
Yeah. So it's about managing that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is why he must be free.
Yeah.
Because from Hayek's point of view, the liberty is necessary in a society with ignorant people.
Hello. Yes, I wanted to actually put forward maybe a very controversial statement. So, in my opinion, I would say that Hayek has failed. And Hayek has failed.
Has failed?
Has failed, yes.
Ah.
Exactly, to what? That's the question. So let me give you like my perspective. So actually, I mean, I'm, you would say, a follower of Jesus Huerta de Soto and Murray Rothbard, so I'm coming from that place. And my opinion is as follows. So to start, let me tell you a really short story. I come originally from Chile. And Chile, of course, we had like the dictatorship of Pinochet, and we had a constitution that was put forward in 1980. And this constitution was very, you would call it, very classical liberal one. It put shackles to government. It was very effective in that perspective. But in the past few years, that hasn't worked at all. Like the state has kept growing, expanding, and nowadays the main ideas, these classical liberal ideas that the Constitution had in its origin, are not working any longer. And you could see that, and you can see that in other places as well. So it's not only what happens in Chile. So my idea and what I'm trying to put forward here is that it's impossible to put shackles on government. So it's either we want a free society or we want a society ruled by government. So viva la libertad carajo, like they say in Argentina, but
so, and did you say that Hayek was the president of Chile?
No, but he went to Chile like in the...
he wasn't the president, he was the prime minister?
No.
Okay, so...
But I can maybe expand a little bit on that. So probably you know there was this... there was this revolution in Chile. They call it the liberal revolution. So they had the Chicago boys, these so-called Chicago school people that were working in the government, and they were the ones that put forward essentially the main pillars of the Chilean constitution.
Who were coming from Milton Friedman, not
yes, and Friedrich von Hayek also went to Chile I think it was in 1980 or so. He gave a conference there.
70s, in the 70s, I think.
Yeah, in the last years of the 70s or so. And he had like this, there's this famous quotation about Hayek saying that I don't remember how, maybe you recall it better than I do, but he said that he preferred, for example, living in a society, a classical liberal, like authoritarian regime, rather than a socialist or a democracy, something like that. So I'm not putting into question actually like that Hayek is. I mean, when I say Hayek failed, it's not that I'm saying that Hayek is a failure in itself. I'm saying that his idea and many of the ideas put forward by the classical liberal school, of course not by Murray Rothbard or, of course, Jesus Huerta de Soto, but those ideas tend to put a lot of faith in government, and I don't put any faith in government at all. So I wanted to know your opinion on that. Do you think that do you agree maybe with some sort of that statement that Hayek or classical liberalism has failed? And if not, then where do you draw the lines with government? How do you put the shackles? How do you control government, essentially?
I mean, I think, as I said before, if you're a classical liberal, you do have that problem. If you believe you need a state for justice and things like that, limiting coercion, then you do have, it's got to have power, and therefore you're going to have some problems, because people like power, and they use it, and it's hard to restrain that, and it's hard to stop people saying, well, I think we should use this power for this purpose and that purpose and this purpose, and then it just grows and grows. So it's true of all classical liberals that they have that problem. And that is why, as you say, many people are drawn to a much more libertarian idea of Rothbard and so on, and Mises to some extent. But I think Hayek talks about constitutions, but I think anybody who has been involved in writing a constitution knows that it's not about a piece of paper. You have to get to the hearts and minds of the public. You have to get them to understand what this is about. And that is a difficult process. But it's a process which is promoted by exercises like this, by people talking about these ideas and seeing the dangers and the limits to where government should be.
I don't know if Hayek failed. In fact, I think the opposite, as I explained in my presentation, but I'm sure that socialism failed. and the
no doubt about
and
that.
the collapse of
Yeah.
and the collapse of Berlin Wall is the best evidence.
Yeah.
As I said, I was born and I was educated in a closed society, in a socialist society, and I saw how people stayed at lines for a piece of bread in 30 years ago. In order to staying at lines, in order to buy not expensive cars or something like that, but bread, eggs, milk, meat. This is the best evidence of failure of socialism, and I saw it in my country, and I feel it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
In Estonian also, because Estonian is a former socialist country like Romania. And I see, I traveled around this very beautiful city, and I can compare as a Romanian the old order and the new order. I can see skyscrapers in Estonia, for example. It's something unbelievable. In a socialist country. How to explain that there are today skyscraper in Tallinn, and 40 years ago you couldn't buy bread or milk. The explanation is this: is the difference between socialism system and capitalist system.
Okay.
Thank you, Felipe.
So coming from the other side of the Andes, so I'm from Mendoza originally, so I lived through on the other side of the Andes of exactly the same.
And having a president like Milei.
Yes, and now we have president like Milei. But let's say, I think that actually the European Union is showing that Hayek was right. Back in the 90s, right, we were looking at the European Union as a haven for sanity, for free markets, right? So we were things that South Americans, that we were like politically aware at that time, we were aspiring to. So the whole thing of the 90s was like trying to get closer to free markets, to be, the Mercosur was created in the image of the European Union and so on. And then something happened and the European Economic Community turned into the European Union. And then it stopped being merely about free markets and started being about something else. And we started treating the European institutions, instead of like harmonizing so that to, let's say, make commerce more efficient and allow more commerce between the member states, to using regulation to impose uniformity as opposed to harmonization in the EU legislation, right? And we started having even the euro and so on. So with the excuse of more economic efficiency, right? And this is something that was pointed by Milei in his last intervention in the World Economic Forum, right? With this idea of we have perfect markets, that we have to use perfect competition in this ideal world, and we have to like cure the market defects. We have constructed basically a big socialist scheme, right? So let's say I think that the road to serfdom, right, is very prescient. It's exactly what happened with the EU, right? And can be seen if you show the picture from 1990 up to today, that's exactly what's happened. Like a little bit of intervention to make something more harmonized and make it easier to do commerce, into something that it's imposing GDPR and green stuff and labeling and state aid, finding state aid where it's just some tax breaks and things of the sort, right? So my question to you is, how can we turn this back? Is there any way that we as European citizens, or we can do something about it? I'm not sure that voting is going to get us out of this, although of course I'm going to try to vote for the most Mileian candidate that I can, right? But in Argentina, it needed to be such a socialist disaster for somebody like Milei to rise up, right? And it was something that was brewing in society with this kind of conferences, with this kind of spreading of libertarian ideas that made the let's say, fertilized the soil so that somebody could rise up. But I think that here in Europe, we are too well off for this to be yet a possibility. So is there something that we could do in the short and to medium term to counter this? Or do we have to go into the black market like we did in Argentina for many years?
My conclusion is that Milei must be the president of the European Commission.
All right. My intervention is going to be a little bit longer because of my friend Javier, so I have to first...
Not longer.
Oh, sorry. First, a little disagreement with him. In essence, if we think about the achievements of the military government in Chile, it was stunning. We did great things. The failure of the Hayek model was when politicians took over and it started this spiral of corruption that they got seduced by, let's call it, their hunger of power. But now I'll go back to my personal question. I'm an industrial aviation and automotive designer. I moved from Chile to Finland about 10 years ago, no, 11 years ago. And first of all, when I was searching for a job, most of the companies were answering to me, "Oh, sorry, you have such a nice CV, we would love to have you, but you know what, the regulations are so high and we need to pay so many fees that paying for a person of your level, it's going to be, let's say, not suitable for the finances of our company." I got that answer in most of cases. Then you know what, I decided to turn the page and start with my own company. I started developing my own company, and when it was the moment I was going to register my company in Finland, the very old lady who was in the tax office told me, "I'll give you an advice, son. Don't start your company. We're going to choke your company and we're going to sink you before you can sell your very first product. And I strongly recommend you try another country with a little bit more of freedom for what you want to do." So after those, let's call it revelations, I moved to Estonia. But I was talking after that with some friends in the Finnish politicians I still have there. And they were telling me, well, you know what? There is a huge influence in Scandinavia, and I can reckon that also in Chile, of what it was the figure of Olof Palme, who basically poisoned the mind of people. He was on the government, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hobson, was it 17 years? So it took 17 years to poison the brains of Scandinavians, and then this socialist fallout contaminated the rest of Europe. So nowadays, even the right-wing parties are reluctant to drop taxes and make a more freedom path for the entrepreneurs. In fact, now in Estonia we have a center-right coalition, and they are putting more taxes. They just are discussing about putting taxes to the cars. Sure. And to close, what do you think what did Olof Palme to brainwash the Swedish society that not even the Swedish Democrats wants to cut the taxes immediately, and what he did poisoning the people, that people keeps voting Social Democrats instead of Swedish Democrats? Thank you.
Well, I think in that case, it's a very strong element at the moment that, you know, the Sweden Democrats are classed as being sort of centre-right wing, but the reality is they're on Labour policy, they are very left-wing and very traditionalist like that. I think the big thing is, I think it goes back further than that. I think there's sort of the tripartite corporatist system as well, the cosy relationship between the unions, organised labour and the government. No one really wants to rock the boat. No one really wants to get involved. Everyone sort of, I would say no one's happy, but this kind of the creep in terms of the high tax model. And I think that people were kind of more convinced before that you get something for it, it's absolutely fine. But we see sort of what you actually get for your money in terms of the quality of the roads, the education system, the hospitals, going down all the time. So I think when the rubber hits the road in terms of the actual everyday experience that people are having, I think that's something that's really sort of starting to see the cracks in the happy paradise that the socialists like to point towards in terms of a working, happy operational system.
What do you think is the best detox therapy for Europe?
The best detox. Well, I think that it's things like we're doing now with the Free Market Roadshow, because honestly, this kind of the woke socialist agenda, they're being more powerful than us. They're getting their agendas across. So we need to do things like they get out there and keep banging the drum to be able to say why this is. And the examples. We're here in Estonia that's actually suffered through socialism. Romania. We've got so many examples here of this is not the solution, but the problem is in in Western Europe, the US. People starting to think this is a good solution. I think it needs to be hold a mirror up to reality.
I would add to that like today, these kinds of events is to bring your friends as well. Okay, so it's not only preaching to the choir, but
the book The Road to Serfdom is dedicated to socialists, to all parties.
Of all parties, yes, that's correct. Sorry, that's me over there.
Yeah. I have hopefully I have a shorter question for a change, but how do we free marketeers defend against a brand of state capitalism, for example, from China, in disguise of, for example, recently a company called Xiaomi launched a car, which is a private company to a large extent, launched an electric car under $20,000. Right? How do we defend against this kind of state capitalism while have private companies seemingly making the way? Right. So,
I think this is a very tricky thing. I mean, we see now sort of the electric vehicle market at the moment, so the talk of actually sort of bringing in sort of barriers for this kind of dumping. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you're sort of the electric vehicle market, the batteries are all from China, so it's been hijacked already in terms of where all the solar panels that we see, that there's an abundance of them around there. I think we're in a very difficult situation now because it's gone so far. How to actually sort of confront this, roll this back and actually be able to address it, that's a very tricky one. I have no solutions to that, sadly.
I don't know if there's a solution, but you have to also think that the current situation, the current states and governments, they are so far from anything that's capitalism There's a lot of work to do inside before considering, because if we can't compete with a 20K electric car, it's because of present regulation here that makes a car not cheaper than 100,000. So first let us do 20,000 cars, and then we will care about the Chinese. Make sense? Good point. Please. Did you turn it on?
So one of the themes of today's discussion is also the Parliament of Europe, the elections which are coming up. Now, elections in itself, they're sort of a market-based process, right? It's a sort of where we put our voice. Obviously, it would be even better if we put our money where our voice is. But this being the case, and seeing whom we actually elect as our representatives and in turn the policies thereof, would you say that we're sort of failing in our democratic processes, or would you rather admit that perhaps in Europe we're not so much concerned about liberty at all?
I think there's an element of once you can take things for granted, you can get complacent, that you see that we have liberty, we see it maybe around us, but we forget the fact that this is something that's so fragile and so can easily be lost if we take the wrong steps. So I think there's the kind of the reality check needed towards that. If we look towards the elections coming up in June, I think we're going to probably see more fragmentation, more polarization in terms of the extremes on both sides. Winning more of a share of the popular vote, but at the same time, hopefully, we can have this. The pendulum will swing back away from the kind of anti-business and industry policies that we've seen that no one wants to talk about because they're seeing they'll be cancelled if they go out and say that this is bad. So hopefully, we'll have more of a reality check as we come into the next Parliament and Commission, but. Yeah, hope over reality, perhaps, but...
I would just say, don't get dewy-eyed about democracy. Democracy is a wonderful way of deciding peacefully the few things that have to be decided collectively. Most things we can decide for ourselves. I don't need the government to tell me how big my can of Coca-Cola should be, but it does. And so this is not your decision. This is my decision. So you have to read the public choice school, Jim Buchanan and people like that, and it soon opens your eyes to this whole system, from the voters to the people who are elected to the officials who put legislation into action. Everybody has their own interests in this. So they're not necessarily doing it for the good of the general public. They may say that, and they may think they're doing it for the good of the general public, but that self-interest comes out at every stage. So that is why I think I and Friedman and Hayek and all these other great folk think that we need to have as small a government as possible. That government should be there. The democratic system is there to decide very few things. The rest we can do ourselves. Yeah. Yes. I know.
I think I don't have a good... Okay, so as long as you want to play that game...
But I recommend two books written by James Buchanan, The Limits of Liberty Between Leviathan and Anarchy, and the second, The Calculus of Consent, where James Buchanan explains these things.
And what about creating new parties? So what we're lacking is options. We're lacking who to vote. So we need to, again, I'm selling my book here, right? So we need these events to get this conscience and say, okay, let's get active, let's organize, and let's participate peacefully in that process, which is the one we have. And by the way, going a little bit back to Hayek, also in the Constitution of Liberty, one of the books, there's a very good discussion about how and why democracy is not the same as freedom or liberty, and the relation between the two. Okay, very interesting stuff there about that to understand that difference. So again, don't do what you said about democracies. Understand what it is for, what it's good for, and then then it's not that magical solution to anything really. But as long as we have it, we can have more parties to participate.
But
we could have another debate about that because, of course, we have people here doing crypto and Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff. In terms of a practical, and sorry, I know you do that as well. Sorry,
but I think
to have failed there. But there's the thing that there are alternatives. I was just sticking to the playbook right now in that sense of the democracy. But there are alternatives somehow.
But I think there's also moving away. I mean, there's the political parties, there's sort of the traditional way of doing things. But I think this decentralized approach, whether it's sort of people going around fiat currencies by looking at crypto, Bitcoin, but also people are actually sort of starting their own movements at the local level, sort of with like-minded individuals, whether it's sort of on specific issues, whether it's through networks, social media groups, these kind of things. So the kind of mobilization is moving away, maybe less than sort of a traditional political party structure to decide things, but people are getting more active with like-minded individuals, more in sort of teams and groups in different constellations. You're not convinced?
Maybe, yeah.
Can you question?
It takes more work to...
Yeah, and question.
Not in the US.
Yeah.
Voting with the food.
Well.
I will refer back to what I said before about democracy, because we are in a democracy, and that is the natural tendency. Okay, so if you give people the possibility to vote in favor of getting stuff for free that is gotten from some innocent victim that cannot defend himself because the violence is the monopoly of the state, the rational answer is, okay, give me free stuff. So we have to look at that problem, the problems of democracy itself, okay? Because it's not the panacea. It's a good method of a peaceful transmission of power. For example, this is one of the reasons, the 2,000-year-old reason, okay, is that peaceful transmission. But the way I see it is the peaceful transmission between dictators. Okay, so and probably you see it the same way. Is that we're peacefully transmitting the power to the next dictator. We're not really, and then that increments the power and increments the power. This power lust. Okay, so it's in that method, in not understanding what democracy is about, which is not about freedom. Democracy is not about freedom in totality. Let's say there's a little bit of there. Okay. But it's not the guarantor or the cause of freedom. You could have a sort of liberty or libertarian-oriented government that is a full republic with no total democracy. Right? So for things, for example, that Milei is doing, what is he doing? A bunch of things he's doing, and we would applaud them, is using executive powers, totally totalitarian, to say, out, 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 out. What is that? Did he go to the parliament? Did he do a referendum? No. He said, I'm going to get the power and get it done. Okay. So we need people to understand those ideas. and then take some action. But as long as you give the power to the people to expand the power of the government, people seem to like it, and that gives you the explanation also why historically. I mean, it's a long discussion, of course, and with a lot of details, but.
So only how you actually answer with the exceptions of few groups actually do.
Yes. We see over the history that people prefer to be slaves.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In light of that, we've done a very good job explaining how Soviet socialism is very bad. I was also born in Romania, half Hungarian. I remember standing in the queues with my grandma for sugar. We discussed how right-wing authoritarian regime in Chile was also very bad. How do we explain the success of Scandinavian socialist monarchies and the success of in previous century?
I think partly these are very small societies, and they have until recently been quite homogeneous societies. And therefore there is a high level of trust within them. One of the great benefits of the market economy is that it promotes trust. It's based on trust, and it doesn't work without trust. So I think in the politics of the Scandinavian nations as well, the smaller Scandinavian nations particularly, there is that trust and that fellow feeling almost, which does enable people to collaborate together in a political sense. The trouble is that pretty quickly breaks down when you've had large immigration of Sweden. I'm the expert on Sweden, but you've had that. Then people start to the trust starts to evaporate, and then you need something else, right? Then the sort of the emotional thing isn't enough. You need some kind of structure to move forward. So I think that probably explains that. I mean, also in the case of places like Norway, they've had huge wealth from oil and timber and all the rest of it. So that does make it. And Iceland with fish and geothermal energy and so on. It's very easy to run an economy if you don't have to pay for your heating. So these particular things all make a difference. But the main one is trade. And again, the Scandinavian countries are big trading nations.
Yeah.
And they've made their money out of trade, so then you can afford it.
Yeah, but
I see what you mean. Yeah,
you might need to focus on which period of history you're really talking about. Second half of last century, the particularly Sweden, they arrived at that point being one of the richest countries in the world. They destroyed it with socialism, to such extent that even the employers and employees were coming out on the street to tell the government to stop it. Okay, one of the events that we had here in the Center for Free Economic Thought was we saw the movie by Johan Norberg. I don't know if you watched it. We had it here. We had a debate and everything, and we had Johan Norberg actually connecting from Sweden on video conference, where we explored just that, the concrete history that tells you that you cannot just go for these big labels of, the Sweden and the Nordics are a story of success of socialism. Well, no, you have to go a little bit deeper for that. Okay, so, I mean, we might do another event like that. I mean, why not? Because I think it's a very fascinating topic to look at that history and see the evolution, how it changed and how those policies were changing, to the point that, yes, they were the richest country, they came with the socialist politics, they destroyed it. Talk to the Argentinians here and everybody else, right? Similar thing. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, if I can a bit defend Sweden and ask a question related to Sweden first. First, if we check recent statistics, actually in Sweden, if we take Gini coefficient by financial assets, what individuals have, Sweden is the most unequal country in Europe. If you only think about accumulated financial assets of families, Gini coefficient is very high. At the same time, if you take regular, not monthly or annual incomes, it's quite low. But okay, my question based on this contradiction is that, well, I have traveled in Sweden, I have traveled in some countries of Latin America. Still, I somehow believe that in such countries as Finland and Sweden, despite bureaucracy, if you are young people with smart ideas and not from a rich family, it's quite easy for you to set up some innovative startup. But I am not sure that's so easy in Mexico or in Chile, but please tell me, if we think about this income difference versus accumulated capital difference in a country, does it somehow influence the free market prospects? But I have also another question, because you see I have these Meta smart glasses. I can anytime make a video or photo, so I'm a bit fan of Meta. But at the same time, is it so that we speak about the state role? But maybe Meta or TikTok or Google are even more powerful players than such countries as Finland and Sweden and etc., and even Chile. Then how to make the playground where free market economy works if there are so strong players in social media and in the internet? So how to solve this problem?
Well, I think in terms of the wealth and the income disparities, yeah, definitely. I mean, we look at sort of the Wallenberg family, how much they sort of own of the sort of OMX 30, like that. But also we have the sort of the access to venture capital, which has been sort of a very strong element within the ecosystem there. Also the link in, I think a lot of the Finland as well, to a certain extent, the link of this kind of like, I'd call it almost like an ecosystem with the universities, the capital, with the smart ideas as well. So creating these groups there, I think that's been something that's good. And if there is individuals can actually spot an opening in the market, it's quite easy and quite quick to be able to start a company, address that gap and get something sort of moving, which I think is very strong. In terms of the income differentials, yes, that's the, there's enough taxes there to make sure that you don't get, if you're not rich already, it's very difficult to get rich in the sort of the local market. But then again, as Eamonn was saying before as well, the sort of when it was very much a very similar society, the cracks have started because of the difference of opinions, individuals trying to game the system, the increase in kind of the falling standards of what's being delivered by the state, but also at the same time things like sort of rent increases. It's impossible to actually find somewhere, prices going up, the rent controls means it's impossible to have without a sort of a second or third hand contract, particularly in Stockholm. But also this element, we see the gang violence, the issue upon issue, which is increasing all the time, which I think is sort of burdening the reality, and certainly sort of the image of this socialist paradise. I think sort of has, if not dead, then certainly been sort of falling down for a long time now.
Do you want to add something? I would add one thing there, I would advise not to put the cart before the horses. So you say, how can the income inequality be or affect the free markets? Income inequality that we observe these days is the direct consequence of the lack of free markets. It's a production of the intervention, okay? From the regulation to the first, number one thing is inflation, okay? So the number one reason of that differential is inflation. There's this regulation, then there's the taxation and all that. So yeah, let's free up the market and then we'll see, okay? We'll go to try that. Sir. And then, so we're gonna have one more here, and then finally, you have your only one, huh?
Proud Milei voter here as well, from Argentina.
There you go.
I've got a question on some technologies that we can use the nuclear race example from the past, but we can use the AI or quantum in the near future. So given that we are not in a fair game and the other team is playing unfairly, so how do we compete from our societies against somebody that is cheating and is using big state intervention and big state power to push forward certain technologies that maybe free market wouldn't have put there as fast, but they are there now. So we have to counter, well, they have, I put it there, but I mean, so do we, and how, what's the role of our government, especially from a libertarian point of view, how do we counter? Because if we don't get there, if we lose that race, we are losing much more than just our citizens' freedom to choose technology.
It's a difficult one because, yes, you're right, but then you don't want to become protectionist yourself. That's the problem. So the problem is, you know, I have no problem at all about, I believe in free markets and free trade, but I have no problem at all about taking action when countries use trade as an instrument of foreign policy, especially if it's used as an instrument against our own interests. And then, to me, that becomes a foreign policy issue. Then the question is, how far should you go? How far are you actually trying to protect your own industries? And there will be plenty of people in your own industries who say, oh, we should be much tougher on the Chinese, you know. Of course. So that's really the question, and it is a matter of it's a political question. It's a matter of judgment, I think.
One more.
The short question would be, what is your opinion on government subsidies for startup companies? This comes from the point of view as a bachelor student. I'm doing my bachelor thesis on this, on the effectiveness of government subsidies for startups. And what current studies have shown, there is no, really, most studies have found, and my study also concludes to a large extent, no crowding out, perhaps to some degree picking winner strategy, but overall a positive effect on the startup ecosystem. So should government stop this really funding if research has shown that it's positive? Companies survive longer, they have better performance overall, the ones that get government subsidies. So should we then stop it?
Yes, we should.
Yeah, straight away. I think if there's a lot of private investors, a lot of private money can be put in. They can back these people if they think it's going to be good. They can lose their money on it fantastically, but taxpayers' money should not be wasted on these kind of picking winners, these kind of ventures. So no, completely against it.
If you're writing on this, you need to read my book on entrepreneurship. But there I cite an article, and I can't remember the authors, and it's called The Boulevard of Broken Dreams. And it's a couple of American authors who are looking at the sort of history of subsidies to new businesses, and how, and they point out that it never achieves what you are hoping it achieves. The Boulevard of Broken Dreams. And I can't remember the authors, I'm afraid, but it's in my book, so read my book and it will tell you.
Gabriel, do you want to?
I don't believe in subsidies, because liberals don't believe in subsidies.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah,
because
it's a religious thing, yeah.
Subsidies means to tax a profitable affairs and to subsidize an affair about we don't know it will be a profitable one.
Right. So the thing there is what's another way to put it there. The way I put that particular point is, who is the government to risk my money into a venture that I didn't choose to invest myself? Okay, my money is mine. I know that there are investments out there. I will invest whenever I want. But who is the government to invest for me and risk my money for me? No.
That would be that the government is there to subsidize innovation that overall the private market would not understand or would not be able to accept the risk, because usually it is the problem that
an invention.
But you're making a circular argument. You're saying that the reason why the subsidies are there is because the subsidies are there.
A real invention is
an invention is a real invention when it's confirmed by the market.
Then it's an innovation. So
innovation.
There's an invention. The innovation is when you take it to the market.
Yes.
If the market freely did not choose to do that, then the government is nobody to do that with your property.
Disagree with current research.
Alexander the Great once visited Diogenes. Diogenes was a Greek philosopher who rejected the comforts of the world and lived in a barrel. And Alexander the Great visited him and said, "Oh, great Diogenes, what can I, Alexander, with all my wealth and armies, what can I do to help you?" And he said, "Stand out of the sunlight." And that's basically what governments have to do, stand out of the sunlight, allow new businesses to grow because there aren't taxes and regulations on them.
Yeah.
Are you talking? Are you continuing? We're having a debate here, so I'm
this
expanding
is a
little
beautiful
bit.
debate, and I would just like to add to this. I hope this is useful. Once you look at the data, how much actually it costs the taxpayer to also administer the doling out of the subsidies, be sure you include this data in your study because it's a huge and very relevant point. It's not so much what the actual money does, because money does great things. Wherever is money, there's great things, at least for a short while the money lasts. But then if you look at how much actually it costs the taxpayer to administer the whole process, you will see that the gain is insignificant, in fact. Thank you.
But how do you measure the positive impact of those things? You made the argument that they don't have the positive impact. How do you measure those impacts, and what's the basis for that? Do we measure GDP? Because there are studies that show the GDP grows positively, that there is more growth, like economic growth regionally when we do those subsidies, growth that is actually higher than the cost of those subsidies. Others point to to the slight opposite, but overall, what measure would you use then?
One and only measure, first of all, is ethics, because you cannot put economy over ethics.
Well, economy is constantly being put over ethics. With current cobalt mining, lobbying in the US, economics is currently killing ethics, I would say, largely. Our large corporations are.
Okay. Yeah, my short answer would be that you measure the thing you measure, but quite often in free marketeer would say that you don't see the things that you can't measure. Right? So you want to measure GDP, but what about the things that didn't happen because you subsidized for those industries, right? So there are a lot of things could have happened, but we don't know if.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Thank you. So I think we're ready to close. If everybody here is
a photo with the
we'll do that in a moment. We'll let them go. It's the turn of perhaps networking, discussion, questions that you didn't want to make in public. That if there's any snacks over there, refreshments to still eat and drink. So we will close it now. I think it's been a great event. I hope you enjoyed and learned something. I want to thank you very much for coming. Thank you to the school, to the IT department. Very helpful. Remember your free books. Okay. Remember to contact us. Feedback. The center. Come back here. Open to the EBS students, but also to everybody else. So let's keep working for liberty. Look for some perhaps political action at some point. Here's the expert, right? And again, thank you very much for coming, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.